You're listening to ArTEEtude, a podcast with artists created and produced by Detlef Schlich, a visual artist and ritual designer, living and loving in West Cork, and best known for his essay about the cause and effect of shamanism, art and digital culture. Working in the field of performance, photography, painting, sound, installations, and film, he will dive and discover with us and a weekly creative guest into the unknown and exciting deep ocean of the creative mind.
This is Detlef Schlich, and today we dive into the unexpected, deep and exciting ocean of the creative mind with Declan Jones. Declan used to write a book. That's why we're gonna dive into we're gonna dive in our creative mind about his experience as a priest. Somehow, I mean, it's half autobiographical, somehow fiction as well. And we finished our last part with the introduction of how, I mean, he as a priest knows a lot about this inside practice, and it's quite interesting. We finished it about how homosexuality became legal. Hi, Declan.
Good morning or good afternoon.
Yeah.
Detlef.
Yeah.
How are you today?
I'm great, and
Okay.
I'm really looking forward to hear more from you about your experience as a priest, because I think it's for the listeners as well very interesting to understand. I consider you as a very open-minded person, and I don't know how many priests nowadays are still really so open-minded and are able to talk without fear of that they could get into trouble with their priesthood, you know.
Yeah, I suppose I was fortunately or unfortunately gifted with a mind that always asked why.
Sure, that's
And that could bring you into trouble with institutions.
I know. Yeah. I mean, so you're an artists are like this. I mean, that's the role of the artist actually. Even in a glitch like this and in a time of crisis, it's all the time good to questioning things, because I think this can bring still hope for the people, for the folks, you know. I
think, well, particularly as we're talking now in the time of the pandemic, that not only is it important to question, I think it's also important to posit alternatives. Yeah. And I think this is where the creative mind can come in, you know, whether it's in the written word, whether it's in a podcast.
I totally agree.
Whether it's in photography or painting.
Poems.
All of this, I think, it's sort of in our stomach.
Yeah.
And that we need a release. And I think people sometimes get a little bit institutionalized while they're watching TV all the time or they're reading certain books. Yeah. And I think they need people of creativity to maybe waken them up from their sort
Giving
of
a shake.
slumber. Yeah.
I mean, I say always art should hurt, and art is hurtful sometimes because art comes from arthritis, and that's the reason why.
Yeah. No, it's
not really. That was a joke. It's
well, I have some words for this.
all right, you saw it already. Oh, that's the reason why I'm so creative.
Yeah.
We no, but I absolutely agree, and I mean it keeps you really sane somehow. I mean the world and the hypocritical behavior of the human species on this planet. I mean, which comes probably as well from animals, because I mean, if you see, for instance, lions, I mean they're not very loyal as well, you know. So everything is very hardwired as well. The thing what we mentioned in the first part about how if one community member is sitting closer at the mass, it's more worth than one sitting in the back.
Yeah,
That's probably is not just from medieval. It is probably as well from the days where people sit at the fire. You know,
possibly. Yes. The
No,
closer you are to the hearth,
you could listen either to the stories or getting warmer as the people behind.
Yes,
And I mean
yeah.
the priority probably the shaman, no? and the medicine man and the chef of this place. They probably sit in front of the fire, and all the rest, you know. I mean,
the great unwashed.
yeah. So yeah. So I mean, it's still tribalism going on. You know.
Yeah, well, you know, you were talking there about the insanity and things. Sometimes I think for artists, because I'm into writing poetry now,
Yeah.
but I
Which
think
is great, yeah.
Yeah.
I hope we will listen at the end of the third chapter to one maybe.
Yeah. But at the moment, I think for the artist, the sanity we attempt to have
Yeah.
is on the other side of insanity. In a sense, I think that we are born and we're born and we whatever, but then
Sure.
the artist sometimes is seen as insane, is sometimes seen as on the periphery
Yeah.
of society.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
to be there, to live there, can be very lonely, can be very frustrating,
I agree with you.
and can be seen like in ancient times. They would send an animal out into the desert with the sins of the people so that they
Yeah.
would be taken away. And sometimes the artist is seen as that,
Yeah.
but it's only when the work begins to be appreciated
Yeah.
that the artist can lose some of the imposition of being insane and can come back to a sanity, and people can begin to, in their own changed sanity, see a reality
Yeah.
that they wouldn't have seen if the artist hadn't passed through that phase of insanity.
Very well said.
You know?
Yeah. No, I agree completely. I mean.
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. Now back to the show.
It is. They compare the artists as well. Sometimes, or actually in general, with shamans, you know, because they used to sit as well at the brink of the society,
Yeah.
and they had to go through a completely different sanity. You know, I mean, if you deal as an artist with surreal elements or expressionistic or impressionistic or whatever, you start to learn to train yourself to see the world on a different way, and the fact that you have your creativity as a gift is the fact that this keeps you somehow sane, and it protects you from getting insane, because you have your catalyst, you have your filter in this art, you know. So that's exactly what you say. I mean, I totally feel that in myself. Helps me a lot, and I mean, I used to hang upside down in clonacility at the tree, you know,
Yeah.
so in order to achieve a different perspective, you know. And that was actually as I created my alter ego, Odin, you know. So and eventually I did a video installation from that, you know. So it informed my art as well, and gave me a completely new perspective, you know. So because Odin was you probably know the Hangman, Odin.
Yes.
And he's as well in a tarot card, you know, and they consider that Odin is one of the spiritual tarot cards, you know, because he was hanging actually upside down in order to find the runes to save his folks, you know.
Yeah.
So that was what and all of a sudden I realized, wow, that is it's true. I mean, I come from Cologne, and it's very close to the myth of Odin and Nibelungen Saga and all that, the River Rhine, you know. So there were a lot of similarities, and art brought me to that, you know.
Okay.
So that's according what you say somehow.
Yeah, and I think people sometimes need to be, as you said earlier, like to be shook by the artist. They need to be shook by the artist in a sense, because they themselves get into an institutional way of living.
Yeah.
And they need that sort of reminder that there is something else besides materialism.
Yeah.
There is something else besides comfort. There is something else out there besides themselves.
Yeah.
This is
Because oftentimes we forget that there are other people.
Yeah.
Like I was away for a walk recently the other day, and I was stopped by a farmer and we were talking, and I said, "These are such beautiful views here." And he said to me, "I don't see them anymore."
I can't. Yeah, I know.
And I thought, how impoverished in one sense that he lives in one of the most beautiful places, I think, in the world.
Yeah.
And he doesn't recognize it anymore.
But that's us, you know. So
yeah, we're all like that.
Yeah,
I'm
like
not
this.
pointing the finger at him. I'm like that, you know. In a sense, it may not be the scenes that I don't appreciate because I do, but it may be people. It may be the situation I'm in.
That is the reason why we feel the older we get, then shorter time span is from 1 week to the other or whatever, you know, because our brain, our memory stores all this information what we have already on board. That means we know, if you know more, like this farmer mentioned. Oh no, I not realized that this where we were fascinated in the first moment is on a later stage makes our it doesn't give us any new what's the name of this dopamine,
right
because I mean information creates dopamine, you know. So therefore, if we have this information already, we don't have this dopamine, we don't get this dopamine anymore. We can create that. I mean, if we learn to appreciate this, you know, and if we learn to appreciate that the texture of the water is something beautiful, you know. So, but we have to explore that again and again and again.
Well, it may be something we might talk about another time. But I'm 68 years of age now.
Yeah.
And I have sold my house.
Yeah.
And I have moved to the southwest of Ireland.
Yeah.
And I am renting with a view to buying.
Yeah.
And some people say, "You're crazy. You had a lovely home. You're in a nice place, loads of neighbours. Why have you done this?" And for me, I needed to open my eyes again, that I was becoming sort of settled.
Yeah.
And I needed to move and find difficulty in my life and turbulence in my life in order to get this dopamine going again.
As you see.
You know, and it's hugely important.
I know.
So
not for everyone, but
no, but for me,
I
that's
can
what I'm
imagine
saying.
that,
Yes,
sure,
I'm not
sure.
saying everybody should do this, but I think I'm not that old to be able to do this, but it's very, very challenging because sometimes it's very difficult, especially to leave a lovely home and a large home, to live in a one-room home with 1.5 bedrooms.
Yeah, because Declan's currently my neighbor, and he's in a small house. That was actually the reason why we met each other. So that's another story. But I think it is important for all of us to challenge ourselves in whichever way we think we need that challenge. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I might say I have the same feeling. If I would know now already this is my house, this is my beautiful house, this is my beautiful wife, this is my beautiful garden, this is my beautiful car, my beautiful ship, I think I would. This would make me probably insane, you know.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
But let's try to get back to the homosexuality and the priesthoods and
Well,
how this came that it turned all of a sudden. I mean, from the 70s to the year 2000 were 30 years, wasn't it? So a lot happened.
Yeah. A lot happened in Ireland, and I think there was an awakening happening, and there was a clash of culture. There was a clash of the culture of the clerical culture, with the Catholic Church, and with a new, vibrant, educated young people who had the opportunity to travel internationally.
So that start when?
That would I think that would have started in the late 70s, early 80s.
Okay.
That it took about 10, 15 years from the introduction of the policy change of the government of the government for the economy, with the introduction of free education in the late 60s. That by then you had probably a second coming into a third generation of young people, say teenagers, who were coming through and thinking things differently, were being taught differently. The church wasn't holding its...
They couldn't hold this information, what was going on.
Yes, and the power that they had. And
you were still working as a priest at this time in the 80s?
Yes, I was. It was during the 80s that I would have stopped working as a priest.
You stopped in the 80s?
Yeah, I stopped in the 80s. And but I guess looking back at it for myself, it wasn't so much to serve the church. I sort of realize now what I did take from the Gospels that Jesus had come to alleviate the poor, he had come to help the downtrodden, to set prisoners free.
Yeah.
And it was this social aspect that I was very, very much taken. And then it was actually in Cologne in Germany that I met with a South American liberation.
In Cologne?
Yeah.
Okay. So I am from Cologne, you know that.
Yes, yeah. So I met a South American liberation theologian, and he was a Franciscan.
Okay.
And we spoke a lot, and I began to be able to understand and form my beliefs around a theological system.
Yeah.
And I began to see that
with the priority of the social
yes,
aspect.
Yes, and then I began to realize that I could probably do more.
Yeah.
Not being with the Franciscans and not being with the Catholic Church.
If you do it on your own, no?
Well, yes, or institutions. So, just very quickly, I ended up then working in Africa, working in famine and war zones. Then I worked with in Northern Ireland for some time with communities there.
Yeah.
And then I worked with homeless people.
Yeah.
And eventually I ended up working with teenage alcoholics and drug addicts.
In where?
In Ireland.
Okay.
As well.
Yeah. But this was for a different authority, no?
Yes, these were charities, institutionals, non-governmental organizations. But for me, the trend was that I was always working with marginalized people, working with people on the periphery, working with people who couldn't get a foothold in society, and were suffering because of civil war or because of ethnic wars, and then people who lived on the streets, and that type of thing. So that's the way I spent the rest of my life until you
stopped working at all.
And then needed just time for myself to breathe, to come together.
I mean, it's quite exhausting. So I used to work with elderly people for a long time in social service, and I mean, you can't do that all of your life.
No.
Friends of mine, they really suffer from that, become alcoholics or being on medication or whatever.
Yeah,
you know?
it's difficult. I was lucky that for me, silence and stillness and being on my own was important, and I could get rejuvenation.
Absolutely,
from that,
and I think especially if you really think, okay, what I'm gonna do is right, and then you start to learn this skill as a priest, and all in a sudden you realize, oh no, what is that? So I can't stay in this organization anymore. You know?
Yeah, some people can. I couldn't. Like, I wouldn't say everybody should do what I did.
Yeah.
You know, but I think it's important to respect the decisions of everyone. And for me, this was my way of living my life.
And absolutely,
And that's
and I think it's good to set a sign, you know, that the church can't go on like they did for years, and that not everyone is a sheep who's doing nothing. You know?
No, and that's like that. It's like a social institution. It will change. It will continue to live, but institutional change in most organizations is slow. It takes a long time.
Oh yes. I mean, the whole history takes a long time.
Yeah, it does. It does.
I have to write that down.
And we're only here for like 60, 70, 80 years, which isn't really a long time.
Not really.
You know? So then like our questions is, where did we come from? And then where did we go? Or where do we go? That's a whole other area.
Where do we go, dear listeners? I would say, so we continue this in part 3 with Declan Jones. And I thank you very much to have you here.
Thank you.
It's a really lovely talk, and see you soon.
I'm enjoying it. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. This is a listener-supported show. I feel honored if you subscribe this show. You can follow me non-financial with a following click on one of my Instagram accounts, or subscribe the visual version of this podcast on YouTube via the link below. If you like what you hear, be sure to tune in this Sunday for the third part of this ArTEEtude audio triptych. If you want to leave a donation for a coffee or a bus ticket, just follow the donation link via the ArTEEtude podcast account. Eventually, I would like to thank, through this medium, all my members and listeners of the I Love West Cork Artists Network from all over the world. Just to remember myself that without you, this here couldn't and wouldn't happen.
You have listened to ArTEEtude, West Cork's first art, fashion and design podcast. ArTEEtude, never so close again. That was too close.